Welcome to the Boxing Source Podcast, where we go over the latest news in boxing and react to all of the fights that happened in the past week. Now, let's go to our host, J.R. Bell. Yo, we should be here live and in full effect for January 25th, 2026, here for this edition of the Boxing Source Podcast. We should be live here, whether it's on YouTube, Rumble, or whatever it is, here live. And of course, you'll be able to check out the replay that will be available in audio form on Spotify and other podcast apps and things like that. But we got a pretty packed show here for this edition. We're kind of like in the area where it's a whole bunch of snowstorms. Snow is almost like all over the country and all that type of stuff here. But we're trying to get what we can here on this edition of the Boxing Source Podcast. Of course, we had a lot of action that happened the other day over at the Fontainebleau in Las Vegas, Nevada. We're going to be talking about the co-feature bout and the main event on that card. A couple of other things that were going on for that card as well. We're going to touch on that. And then, of course, we got for January 31st, the headlining fight card is for Ring 6, right, with Teofimo Lopez taking on Shakur Stevenson. But we know that we do have two world title bouts that are in the 154-pound division that will be on the same day. And Top Rank, just going to say this here off rip, Top Rank putting the thing there with Xander Zayas against Abbas Barao on the Top Rank Classics channel. That was like well overdue. I'm like, come on, you're going to have a unification bout in the 154-pound division, and you mean to tell me that y'all weren't going to be able to have it on some type of TV or something? That would have been crazy work if that would have happened. So for them to put it on the Top Rank Classics channel, shout out to them. Everybody here that's live here on the conversation, shout out to y'all here. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. So we're going to get into it, of course, with what happened at the Fontainebleau in Las Vegas. You did have the IBF Lightweight Championship on the line. You did have there with Raymond Muratalla making a first defense of that IBF Lightweight title against Andy Cruz, with Ray Muratalla there with a record of 23 wins, 0 losses, and Andy Cruz with a record of 6 wins and no losses, right? And they had Andy Cruz as, the mandatory challenger for the IBF title, with Ray Muratalla just having his first defense. And, I was saying that, going into this bout, it was going to be something because, of course, Ray Muratalla had been the IBF interim champion, with Vasyl Lomachenko being the IBF full champion. But last year we had Lomachenko retiring, right? So, with that happening, Ray Muratalla ended up being the IBF champion there. Just real quick, nobody kind of called Ray Muratalla email champion. But so that's a whole nother story, right? All right, but here in this bout against Andy Cruz, we had to see, how he would be able to adapt or, work with the style of Andy Cruz in this bout here for 12 rounds, right? And, for me, going into this bout, I had leaned towards Andy Cruz for the win. I thought it was going to be like a tough battle there for Ray Muratalla here in this instance. And in those first couple of rounds, you kind of like seen that there, because Andy Cruz was like, working off of his back foot, but he was like throwing a jab and landing the jab off of his back foot there, on multiple occasions, but then was also able to land a counter right hand on a couple of occasions here in this instance. And for me, I thought that was going to be able to rack out the rounds for him, here early in the fight. But, it seemed like the activity of Raymond Muratalla, him moving forward, him trying to get within range, him, throwing a number of punches was kind of like giving him the advantage from an activity standpoint. But from looking at it, from the cameras, a number of times it didn't seem like it was like landing significantly in comparison to like Andy Cruz's punches landed, which, seemed like it was, very clear. Like it didn't seem like it was like blocked as much as it was when, Andy Cruz was, getting hit by punches from Ray Muratalla there, particularly early in the bout. And, I feel like, that Andy Cruz had like an advantage of sorts, even though you did have Ray Muratalla be competitive and active, throughout each and every round. So, for those that were watching live, they kind of like seen it as a very close, close rounds from round 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. But, for me, it was more about, how Andy Cruz kind of reacted or, acted towards what Ray Muratalla was doing. And I felt like early in that bout, he was, landing the more significant shots. He was kind of like controlling it with the jab, when he was throwing it, right? But like after like round 6 or so, you didn't really see that much of the jab. You still see the movement there from Andy Cruz, but not as much with the jab. Sometimes he would throw it from an orthodox stance. Sometimes he would switch it around and be in the southpaw stance and kind of like throw it, with the southpaw and everything like that. But you kind of like seeing the activity of throwing a jab that wasn't as present as it was, in those first 4, 5, 6 rounds. And that kind of like gave the opportunity, at least for me watching it live, that gave the opportunity for Ray Muratalla to, gain some rounds in, throwing, like I said, with the activity. Sometimes he would throw 3 or 4 punches at a time, and it didn't necessarily matter if the thing would have been landing or not or whatever. As long as he was getting the activity in, he just felt like that would be something to kind of like wear down Andy Cruz, and going to the body, his consistent attack to the body was the game plan. From Robert Garcia in the corner there for Ray Muratalla, right? And thinking that it would kind of like slow down Andy Cruz in his movement. You know what I mean? So the thing about it is that once you got to the back half of the fight, or I would say like the last 4 or 5 rounds, starting from round 8 through round 12, you kind of seen moments from both fighters. Like I think with Andy Cruz, like he would start off with a combination there early in the round, or like dominate the first like minute or so in the round, and then there could be like some either a lull of activity, or you could see like Ray Muratalla still try to get within range, try to throw punches, get within range, land shots to the body, and then at the end of a round, either you would get the activity coming from Ray Muratalla, or you would kind of like see the movement and the timing from Andy Cruz to get the most out of that last part, right? And I'll go into like how those how you break up your rounds as a judge here in a bit, because I think that there's like a lot of weight towards that when it should be scored throughout the full round. Like 1 minute of one round shouldn't have more significance than another minute in another round and stuff like that. So I'll get into that there, in a bit. But you get into like those championship rounds, because like after like round 10, you kind of like felt like it was close within that round 10, right? And then in those last couple of rounds, you seen the same thing. It was more of like Andy Cruz would have a moment, Ray Muratalla would have a moment, Andy Cruz would have something, or Ray Muratalla would have something there in the 11th round. And then in the 12th, for me, the 12th, it was more about Andy Cruz moving around the ring more than like his kind of like his activity with his hands. You kind of like seeing there with Ray Muratalla still, up there trying to get within range, throw the punches, make the activity, see if he could wear down Andy Cruz and things like that, that to where you didn't see that much as far as like the punch activity there from Andy Cruz, in that last round, right? So you get to the full 12 rounds, right? And, for me, I thought it was very close. I thought it was very close once you got through the 12 rounds, right? And then after the 12 rounds, you get to the scorecards. Then you had, of course, the ring announcer there for Matchroom be there. And he says, yeah, we go to the score totals. And he had like one judge having it 114, 114, right? And then you had another judge have this thing scored about 118, 110, and then another judge score it 116, 112 in favor of Raymond Muratalla for him to keep the IBF lightweight championship. Okay. Um, like for me, when I saw those scores, or when I heard those scores, I was like, well, okay, you got a 114, 114. Okay, that means the fight was even, right? Then you had the 118, 110. That means 10 rounds to 2 in favor of one fighter. And, 116, 112 means 8 rounds to 4. Now, for me, I couldn't see it any way, shape, form, or fashion that any fighter in this fight had 10 rounds in favor of them. Nah, couldn't. You couldn't. And the thing about it was, I just didn't feel like, when you have these close rounds and it's very tough to score, that you would give the majority of those rounds to one particular fighter. At least I didn't see it. Okay. Now, you had the whole thing there also with what was going on with the 8 rounds to 4. That that pretty much is almost the same way. I know we had here like on the live chat here, you got Jesus M saying that like amateur child not translating to pro level versus top guys. That's not necessarily, for me, you can't necessarily view a particular style and say, hey, because he does it this way, that it shouldn't really count as much. As I've been saying for years, it's been like my theme at the end of the show is like, hey, point of boxing is to hit and not get hit. That's what I've been saying. Like the thing as far as like having the action and all that type of stuff, yeah, it makes for great fights. But at the same time, you're not trying to get hit, okay? And it's still a contact sport at the end of the day. So you trying to have it to where you're not getting hit as many times as your opponent is getting hit. So you could have the defensive style, but at least you could be to the point where, hey, you're all actually landing and scoring effectively. And if you go by like the judging criteria in most cases, they're like effective aggression, ring generalship, and that type of thing, right? So if you're able to basically control what's going on in the fight, it doesn't matter if your opponent is coming forward or whatever it is. If they're not being effective while doing it, then you can't give them credit for just going forward and throwing punches. You got to be able to see that, hey, this is actually affecting the opponent when that person's going forward. But if he's still able to do what he could do, or if he seems like he's still getting an advantage while that person is going forward, then you got to be able to give him credit towards that. And that's kind of like how I felt most of this fight was. It was more about Andy Cruz kind of like controlling the pace, moving around the ring effectively, landing more clear shots over the course of the fight, particularly in the first half of the fight. And that I just feel like it could have been something where you could have it close. You could have it 7 rounds to 5. You could have it 6 rounds to 6, as one judge had it. But like 8 rounds to 4 in favor of one fighter, I didn't see it. And definitely 10 rounds to 2 in favor of one fighter, I didn't see that. Now, you go to the what is it, the stats or whatever it is. Maybe if y'all watching live, let me see here if I could hit the share button on this thing here and see what happens, see what goes down. So you'll be able to see here where it shows for the punch stats. So they kind of like show the punch stats here, round by round. They see that you got like Andy Cruz landing more punches in a couple of rounds in those first couple of rounds, and then had the slight advantage there in round 4, round 5. It was close. Like I said, in round 6, from round to 6, you kind of like see that it was kind of close as far as like the overall like punches landed and things like that. And so you kind of like go through each of these rounds and you see that, hey, it's very close on both sides. So for me, it was more about, total punches. Hey, you could see right there, right? Total punches, 175 to 176. Okay. Cruz, more effective. The amount of activity overall, it just didn't, it didn't even seem like it was that much. Even though like some were saying like, hey, okay, he's throwing a lot of punches, but outside of like, round 6, round 5, I would say round 5, round 6, what is it, 7, right? That you see a significant difference, or maybe like round 12. But outside of that, you kind of like see the activity as far as like the punch output be similar for both fighters, right? So, I kind of like felt like with, Andy Cruz, overall having more punches, well, a better percentage because it was only like basically one punch according to CompuBox, right? But, landing more jabs there. Of course, Muratalla with the power punches advantage, which, goes to the style that he had. But, kind of like made it very close on the stat line. But with Cruz kind of doing what he was doing, I just felt like his pace and how he was able to kind of like control the pace and not really be thrown off or kind of, be off balance with what Muratalla was doing over the course of the 12 rounds. I thought that would have been able to give him, more credit. But, like I was saying, with one of the judges there, I would say is Max DeLuca was the one that scored it 114 to 114. Okay. Tim Cheatham with that 118, 110 in favor of Muratalla, that is, I'm being honest with y'all, that's nasty work right there. That is nasty work. Because, like I said, if I'm seeing that it's very close there within the round and things like that, I'm looking at how the style and how it meshes up, and then seeing again what is clearly shown when punches are being landed. And that's why I was saying there within the first half of the fight, you kind of like seeing Andy Cruz landing very sharp with the jab, one, and then with the counter right hands. Because sometimes, especially in those first couple of rounds, you kind of seen Andy Cruz be like either slide back a little bit or step back a little bit and come back with the right hand. And you could see like those right hands were clearly landing on Ray Muratalla. It said like saving pillow punches. That's not pillow punching when you're seeing actually Muratalla. Y'all seen, come on, y'all. Y'all seen Ray Muratalla's eyes and all that stuff that was going on around his eyes. Nah, man. Like, I'm sorry, but you can't have all of those marks around your eyes and then claim that he's pillow punching and that he wasn't really hurting you like that. Like, nah. Like, that's why I'm saying it's like you again. What I was saying earlier, whether the style kind of like is an amateur style or something like that, like, hey, he's trying to put it to where he's not getting hit. If I'm able to avoid your punches and I'm able to land mine more than you, then I should be able to have the advantage either in the round or in the fight overall. Like, I'm not gonna be adapting to no style or try to be there to kind of scrap it out with you if I don't have to. If that's not the way that I want to actually win the fights, why would I go ahead and do that? Like, there's no point in doing that. So for Andy Cruz, if he felt like that was the method for him to win the fight, then that's what he needed to do. You know, um, and I kind of like feel like it was to the point where if you're gonna give fighters like more credit to having activity than actually being effective with the activity, then it's almost like whatever. You know what I mean? Let's see, man. Shout out to those on here on the YouTube chat. It says, what is it? Boxing has been asserted by the intellectual bankrupt. Aggression without effectiveness means absolutely nothing. The zone and many commentator crews love lying. You know what? You know what the funny thing about this is, right? Well, with this particular fight, right? You got your the zone crew and all that type of stuff with doing commentating and whatever it is. What do they have, man? Chris Mannix and what Sergio Mora and them and all that, right? This thing was on the zone, right? The zone, they usually have Golden Boy cards up until recently, supposedly, and Matchroom cards. This was a Matchroom boxing card. Wait a minute, who's the fighter that's under Matchroom boxing? Wait, isn't it Andy Cruz? Wait, so you are having these commentators lean more towards the fighter that's not on match. You know what? I ain't even go even gonna go into that. But you kind of like see though that a lot of times they do favor or they do lean towards or be more favorable towards fighters that have a more active style or move forward and things like that, while people that kind of like slip and move, counter and miss, move off to the side and whatever, they don't really kind of like mention that. You know what I mean? Like a sharp counter by Andy Cruz, big right hand by Andy Cruz. You really didn't hear much of that, but you heard a lot in reference to Raymond Muratalla and what he was doing. Even when like a lot of times he would throw 3 or 4 punches at a time, but Andy Cruz is like slipping, blocking a lot of that. You know what I mean? So that's the thing about it, is like I don't, and I haven't really been one to kind of like give credence to fighters that are active with their hands if they're not effective with their hands. If I see it missing, I'm gonna say that these punches are missing. I ain't gonna say, oh my God, look at this 3, 4, 5 punch combo. Well, you throwing 3 or 4, 5 punches and you only landed one, that ain't a good job of throwing punches, bro. I'm sorry. So I feel like it's more of a lot of these commentators give more credence towards activity than accuracy, right? So I'm not here to kind of like say, hey, if this fighter here is throwing, let's say he's throwing 30 punches, but he lands 11. The opponent throws 20 punches, but he lands, 8 or 9 or 10. The one that's throwing 8 or 9 or landing 8 or 9, more accurate, more efficient. So he should be able to get credit for that. But a lot of times you don't see that with the commentary. Sometimes you don't see that with the judges. You know what I mean? I kind of say like, I've said this in previous podcasts, right? Yeah, a lot of times as fans or, analysts or something like that, if you're not there, or even if you are there as an analyst, right? In a sense, or if you're media, right? You're kind of like viewing it a certain way. You have all the angles, of course, with the TVs and stuff like that. Like, for example, if you're able to, switch the camera up or something like that, you know what I mean? Like you could switch the camera up like this and then get another view and then they go back to another view like this. Then you kind of see different angles of what's going on in the ring because you kind of like see it from overhead, right? But with being there ringside, like if you're a photographer or something like that, or if you're a camera crew and you're like ringside, or you're like one of those analysts, right? You kind of like see things a certain way. And I said this when it comes to judges, you only get one view where either like you could be on one end of the ring and you got to look all the way over here or look all the way over there, or you got like a camera person that's right here, or you got like a photographer like me that's in the way, over here on the right side. So sometimes when you do have like a neutral corner or something like that, and action is going on in the neutral corner, you got to see what's going on right there. And some of the things you're not able to see as a judge, but you got to kind of see what's going on as far as like overall effect of punches being landed and how it kind of like changes what a fighter does during the round. And if it doesn't, then you know what I mean? It says that Chris Mannix there gave Muratalla 2 of the first 4 rounds for landing absolutely wet. He was getting his ears jabbed off. I mean, hey, live, there was like a number of people that were watching live that were saying like those first 4 rounds were close. You know what I mean? But, like I was saying with Andy Cruz landing the more telling shots, or, the ones that kind of like seemed like it had the most effect on them, then you kind of see that, hey, if you ain't necessarily giving a fighter credit for landing those shots, then almost it's like, what's the point? He said, he also says there that Muratalla didn't land more than 18 to 20% of the shots he threw cleanly. Hey, I mean, he did land some, punches that we did see, going to the body or going upstairs. But there's like one time when, he threw like a right hand, but it kind of like got caught by Andy Cruz's, forearm or something like that. But, like I said, a lot of times the activity of a fighter, judges will give like a lot of credit towards the activity of a fighter instead of like I said, with ring generalship, proper defense, either slip and counter, catch and counter, block, turn around and throw a counter right and that type of stuff. Like you don't necessarily get that type of credit. You know what I mean? So with that being said, that's why I kind of like felt like that the cards where it said that Tim Cheatham, what it was that scored it 10-2 in favor of Raymond Muratalla. That was, like I said, that was nasty work. You know what I mean? You had the another judge there in Steve Weisfeld that scored it 116-112, which is 8-4 in favor of Raymond Muratalla. Now, again, I was saying there number of close rounds, but if you see it live and it's like close rounds, then that means a lot of those were pretty much like in favor of Raymond Muratalla, right? So, I mean, I'll see here if I could, pull up the joint as far as like the scorecard, right? Because they'll, have that for what they did is round by round, right? So my thing is like, how were you able to kind of like say that he won the majority of those rounds? You know what I'm saying? That was my thing. I see something here where they kind of what is this from Ready to Fight? I guess shout out to Ready to Fight real quick. It says that according to 3 judges, Muratalla dominated the first half of the fight. That's crazy. You know what I mean? So I mean, I'll pull it up here if you're viewing here on YouTube or on Rumble. Oh god, the whole thing with the cookies, right? All right, so you should be able to see it right there. I'm gonna see if I can go ahead and zoom in there. Maybe we could see it here a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Right. So look at this. Right. The one that had it 118-110. Check it out. Right. For Tim Cheatham, that had it 118-110. He had round 2 through round 7 in favor of Ray Muratalla. Okay. The one that scored a 116-112 had round 2 to round 7 in favor of Ray Muratalla. That's crazy work. Like if you're gonna say like a number of these fights, you see it live and they're very close, and you got Andy Cruz doing what he's doing, you got Ray Muratalla doing what he's doing, then how are you gonna, as I said, have a majority of those close rounds in favor of one fighter, and it's over and over and over and over again? So I mean, look at that. That shows you 10-2, and he gave him round 1, and he gave Andy Cruz round 8, and that was it. That's crazy. That's crazy. Here's another thing in boxing. It depends on what style the judges prefer. There's no such rule that give them that preference. It doesn't exist. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is. It's just at the same time, you could go through the history of a number of these judges. I mean, you got these guys right here, right? You got, like I said, Tim Cheatham, long-time judge right there, right? You got Max DeLuca and Steve Weisfeld. They're like 3 of the most experienced most like tenured judges that you have here in the boxing game, right? But hey, sometimes they view things one way or whatever. But here in this instance, like I just felt like the activity from Ray Muratalla wasn't that significant enough for him to basically get the advantage in the number of these rounds. And as I was showing here with the CompuBox statistics, the punch, output or the numbers, they weren't necessarily that much of a difference. They weren't, so there you go. It said, yeah, Gorgio, shout out Gorgio. It says, hey, that's why Andy did his best the first half of the fight. Yeah. It said, Dante's boxing talk here says, Andy definitely lost on the back foot, and Raymond landed better punches and controlled tempo of the fight. I disagree with that. Because if you see what was happening, especially in the first half of the fight, let me go back to this right here. Hold on. All right, there we go. So if you go back to what was going on in the first half of the fight, especially in those first 2 rounds, the jab of Andy Cruz And the counter right hand of Andy Cruz was landing real good on Raymond Muratalla in that. I didn't think that the activity really meant that much for Muratalla if you're getting countered and if you're getting pretty much like outlanded from the stats, especially in those first half of the fight. He was getting outlanded. So even if he was throwing that many punches, like if you're not landing them, if you're if they're getting blocked, that really that shouldn't count. Like this whole thing about amateur stuff and all of that, people bring it up, but then at the same time, people talk about what's happening in a lot of fights, and they bring up the score, the CompuBox totals, right? So if you look at that and say, "Oh my God, oh he landed this many punches," how is that much different than what's going on in the amateurs? Because they score through punches landed, that they say punches landed. You know what I mean? So that's the thing about it. All right. So I just felt like it was way too close for two scores to be that significant in favor of Ray Muratalla. And, like I was saying, two of the judges basically had it, they had it 78-74 in favor of Ray Muratalla through 8 rounds. So what that meant was after round 8, Andy Cruz would have had to win all 4 rounds from 9 through 12 in order to have 2 of those cards end up being a draw, right? Well, at the same token, with the one that had it 114, he scored it, as I said, 6 rounds to 6. By the time it was through round 8, he had it 76-76 even. He had it even through 8 rounds, which, like I said, I felt like that was basically the fight. It was that close all the way around. And for me, I felt like it was a good fight. It was a good fight where 6-6, 7-5, either way would have made sense. But like an 8 rounds to 4 or a 10 rounds to 2, something like that, nah, couldn't really do that. You know what I mean? So that's the thing about it. Never heard him nor anything. Andy got hurt twice. Listen, you can't be having the wealth that Ray Muratalla had from not getting hurt or not getting buzzed. Like those shots, you could see those shots, right? You could see them. So, for me, I felt like it was Andy Cruz was still able to do what he could do for the majority of the fight. It was just that the activity of, the style of Raymond Muratalla moving in, doing a couple foot feints, trying to slip in or whatever, kind of made it to be a very close fight, and it was a very, very good fight. That was the thing too about this, right? It was a very, very good fight, starting from round 1 up into round 12. You had a lot of activity from both of the fighters, whether it was through punches, proper movement, slip and counter, landing to the body, punches to the body, jabs to the body, and then going upstairs like what Andy Cruz was doing, or just a dedicated attack to the body and then working up from Raymond Muratalla. So for me, I felt like it was just good action back and forth from both of those fighters. It was just that the cards from like I said, from Tim Cheatham there, and from Steve Weisfeld, that kind of like said, man, that if you missed a fight and you said, well, you got one judge that has it even, and these two judges have it significantly in favor of one fighter, then what in the world was going on to where two judges had it like leaning towards one fighter for that much? You would think that if it was kind of even, that you would get like a 7-5 score somewhere, or probably like a majority draw. But we didn't get that. You know what I mean? So that's the thing about it, man. Shout out to those in the live chat. We getting a lot of action as far as like the chatting and activity in the live chat, man. This shows like it was very contested as far as like the debate is for who won. I just felt like it was something where Andy Cruz and Ray Muratalla did their thing. So with that being said, now you have it to where Okay, Raymond Muratalla makes his first defense of the IBF lightweight title, has it against the mandatory challenger there in Andy Cruz. And so we got to see, what could be next out there. Now, the thing about it, especially when I was talking about the thing with Ray Muratalla, right? And someone brought up the thing as far as like the zone commentators and having them be in favor of a specific fighter. I said the zone usually has the fights for Matchroom and Top Rank. Well, I mean, right now, Top Rank ain't really got a deal, a network deal, TV deal, broadcast deal, any type of deal or anything like that right now, right? So, kind of like is interesting that, how folks say, oh, well, they have, the judges be in favor of the fighter where, it's based on. So they're going to have the judges say they could go in favor of the PBC fighter or the Top Rank fighter if it was on ESPN, like, when they were on ESPN last year or whatever it is, right? Ray Muratalla is a top ranked fighter. Ray Muratalla is a top ranked fighter. So, and Andy Cruz, as I said, was the matchroom fighter. So, you kind of like feel like it was interesting that Andy Cruz didn't get, as they say, a benefit of the doubt being a matchroom fighter or whatever it is, right? But now Andy Cruz basically has to, start from, what I would say square one. He has to, go back in the rankings, whether it's for the IBF, WBA, or whatever. And for, Ray Muratalla, this kind of like opens up, the possibility of him fighting other world champions that's out there. Now, I know we got one world champion that is going to be fighting here on Saturday night, but he's going to be fighting at 140 pounds, right? You got the WBO champion that was newly crowned, another top ranked fighter in Abdullah Mason. So that kind of like says, hey, what's going on? We like top rank got to be out there with that thing, man. But then you got the thing, the whole WBA situation, of course, with Tank Davis and his things or whatever it is. Now the thing is vacant or whatever, right? And with that being said, then you got it to the point where you got to figure out who's going to be fighting for the WBA title, right? And then from that, what's going to happen at the top of the 135-pound division, especially if Shakur Stevenson happens to defeat Teofimo Lopez next week for the WBO and Ring Magazine title at 140. So for Ray Muratalla, he stays undefeated. He's there, and things could potentially open up with the way that the fight was. It kind of like gives him a little bit more popularity, more attention, and things like that. So it could lead to some good fights. That's why I said like the whole thing with Abdullah Mason, him being the WBO champion. I would have thought like he would have a fight already defending the WBO title, but with that situation with Top Rank, you can't necessarily get him in the ring unless if they say, hey, he's going to be on one of those, Turkey out sheet cards or something like that. You know what I mean? My guy G5 Jeff in the building, he says he had it 115, 113 Muratalla. So I mean, hey, if you had it 7 rounds to 5 either way, wouldn't necessarily blame you on that. 6 rounds to 6, hey, I don't blame you. But 8 rounds to 4 either way, nah. This my thing is way too many close rounds, especially in the first half of the fight where you could say, hey, you could lean each like every single close round in favor of one fighter. Like that, like I said, I don't like the thing as far as like having a number of close rounds in favor of one particular fighter. If you kind of like see some things that kind of stand out within the round, right? That's one. And two, the whole thing about, oh, you got to take the belt from the champion. No, you don't. You don't approach it like the world champion goes into the fight already having like 1 or 2 rounds in the bank. You can't do that. Like you got to approach every fight like it's a brand new fight, like it's one fighter against another fighter, right? So if they end up, hey, doing better, or they show that they do better than the challenger, then that's that. If the challenger shows that they've done better than the champion in that particular fight, you got to give them that type of credit. You know, you can't necessarily view it as, oh well, because it was so close, you gotta pretty much like say either it's for the champion or it's a draw. Nah. Mm-mm. If you win a round, you win the round. If you lose the round, you lose the round. You know what I mean? So that's the thing about it. Yeah, it's like tough fight to score. Yeah, like I was saying, man, those first 5 or 6 rounds, tough fight to score. Even like after that, you had a number of close rounds. Like I was saying with round eight, you had it to where like Andy Cruz would have like a fast start, and then Raymond Muratalla would get back into it, and then the last part of the round it was up in the air, so very tough to score. You know what I mean? So yeah, she said Andy Cruz would have went toe to toe, but he was scared by getting knocked out. Oh, come on, man. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like I said, if you don't have to necessarily fight out of your element, you don't. Now, there's times where, hey, if you feel like you're extremely limited in one sense and that you're not necessarily getting an advantage from doing what you're doing, then maybe you have to take that risk. But in a sense, if you feel like, hey, he's not really doing much, affecting me while I'm, on my style, then why would I change? You know what I mean? Uh, Like, come on, man. Like come on. Hey, man. I'll get to the whole thing in reference to Shakur and Teofimo in a minute, but like I was saying with what was going down with Ray Muratalla and Andy Cruz, like I said, props for that fight. It was a very good fight there between those two combatants for the IBF lightweight championship. And like I said, it was more about the whole thing as far as like the story with the judges, right? Which was a theme in the fight card, or at least the main event and the co-feature, right? Because says who goes toe to toe when you have elite defense? Like, I mean, like I said, you fight to what you're comfortable with, or you fight to where you know that you have an advantage. You don't really step outside of that sphere if you don't have to. So is that. But yeah, exactly. Like, gotta take the title from the champ. Nah, it's a 10-point system, then you add them up. There it is. Like I said, you approach this bout like it's just two combatants that don't have anything on them. You don't say that, hey, because he's the champion, that, oh, well, he's the champion, let's give him 1 or 2 rounds by default. What? No. It don't work that way, cuz. It don't work that way. Right? So, we had to see like how this whole thing is or whatever it is, man. But like I was saying with the theme, as far as like the judges, you had what was going on in the co-feature bout. Okay. They say it was the WBC USA Light Heavyweight Championship there between Khalil and with Jesse Hart. Okay. Now I'm gonna be seeing if I could go into that particular fight in a bit, but I wanted to catch reactions from one of our panelists to join in here. He is the resident chef of the Boston Source podcast in the building. It's our guy here, Brother Terrell Thomas. What's going on, Brother Terrell?
Hey, what's up, man? How's everything?
All good, man. All good, man. I'm not necessarily, snowed in, over here, with all of this snow and stuff going on, but I'm all good. What's happening, Terrell?
Yeah, man. I'm sorry. I just kind of been absent lately. Just been busy, liping, all that stuff.
For sure.
But even last night, I was kind of disappointed. Last night, I was actually watching the card last night with Andy Cruz and all that stuff, and it got interrupted. So I did not get a full viewership of the last night's card.
Mm.
So I just had to read about it this morning and things like that. And of course, rely upon your expert analysis of what happened.
Word. Like with what you were able to see, did you feel like it was like a close fight? or back and forth, or did you feel like one particular fighter had an advantage there from what you were watching?
Well, I'll just back up a little bit. Going into the fight, we know that Muratalla was definitely coming as the belt holder. Andy Cruz coming in as a highly heralded prospect contender like that.
Hmm.
Has what 6, 7, 8 fights per
That
fights,
was
right?
his seventh pro fight, there against Muratalla.
So and when you look at that in the detail, right? We know he comes from Cuba, right? Has been trained up there in Philadelphia like that with the trainer up there like that. And when you look at a similar story with someone that comes in highly heralded, let's look back at Lomachenko, right? Now,
Hmm.
you can kind of compare their backgrounds like that. Uh, a lot of amateur experience like that,
Right.
highly heralded, and coming in early, very early on to get a title shot. I mean, when Lomachenko first fought, who's that? What's the Mexican's name that he fought?
Well, he had
Uh,
one pro fight.
yeah,
Then he
yeah,
went up against Orlando Salido for the WBO featherweight championship at the time.
yeah. And what's funny, I clearly remember that we talked about that fight on the podcast way back when. It's kind of well, but it's, ain't no kind of it never happens where you come in to immediately fight for a belt. That doesn't happen. So that's just a lot of connections, things like that. I mean, of course, you gotta and bottom line, you gotta if you're gonna walk, you gotta talk, you gotta walk the walk. We know that.
Yeah.
So, but when Lomachenko came in, he didn't expect for Orlando Salido back then to be like just to rough it up, make it a dirty fight,
Hmm.
and ultimately he lost. Last night it wasn't like that, but when I compare Lomachenko to Andy Cruz, like I said once again, not much professional experience, but a ton of amateur experience right there, right? So I expect to be. I didn't expect a dominant win by either side. I didn't expect that, but even as the fight progressed along, a little bit I did watch, it seemed like it was an evening match fight, right? And from what I was reading prior to the fight, it seemed like most people had Andy Cruz come out to be the winner, right? But of course, that's why they fight the fights, and that's what happens like that. So, from what I did observe, Mutai just was just able to hold his composure and pepper him like that with stuff like that. So I didn't get too much detail. So don't kill me, please don't kill me.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, the thing was, like I said, with the activity that was showing out there for Ray Muratalla, kind of like, made it visually like he was, being very active and things like that, right? But, I was mentioning earlier, when it came to like the punch stats, yeah, you did have it to where Muratalla threw like 611 total punches, and with Cruz throwing like 537, but the landed was pretty much the same. It was like around 175 to 176, and it was more about what Muratalla was doing in the second half of the fight, or like from round 5 to round 12 was where that activity kind of like picked up. But at the same token, for a majority of those rounds, the punches that were being thrown by both fighters were at or kind of like close to being equal for a number of those rounds. So for me, when it's more like that, then you kind of like give the advantage towards a fighter that feels like he's more, either controlling the fight or kind of like dominating the pace of the fight, or being more efficient with his punches. And I felt like Andy Cruz was a little bit more efficient in his punches for I would say most of the fight, but it wasn't to where it was so significant that I would give him like a 8 rounds to 4. No, it wasn't necessarily like that. Like it could be 7 rounds to 5, or it could be something where you kind of like say, "Hey, this is like way too close." So you could like give Cruz 6 rounds, you could give Muratalla 6 rounds, but I just felt like it was like way too close there for it to be like something significant in favor of either fighter.
All right, and do me a favor. So Cruz has been fighting training with Ennis, right? The Ennis camp.
Right, Bozienis,
All
yes.
right. So let's take a look at that real quick. So do me a favor. Describe the classic Cuban style. Just describe that.
Defense first, more about either movement as far as like timely movement, then like as some people would say, running around the ring, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people kind of like point to when Ringendahl fought. Oh, what was the guy's name?
Was
Um,
that right?
no, it wasn't. It wasn't a thing for. Uh, and I'm trying to find out what his name was because it
But
was where like
he basically ran around the ring for 12
yeah,
rounds,
he
right?
didn't he
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
like throw any punches at all, right? And yeah, people kind of like try to point out to something like that, but that's not necessarily what the Cuban style is. It's more about outpointing your opponent, making your fighters miss and that type of thing, right? So it wasn't like you got Rigo versus Casemiro. That was who I was trying to figure out. Like Casemiro, he wasn't like throwing anything. He would just stand there, not throwing punches at all, right? But other times you have it to where they'll have like slight movement. They'll see if they'll be a little bit out of range of their opponent, and then come back and counter or something like that, or just be very precise with their jab, right? So while it may seem like it's like a defense first style, but it's more about like outpointing your opponent. You feel me?
Yeah. So even with that said, what's my man's name? That's fought at 154. That's now at 160. Cuban. What's his name?
You got Erislandy Lara.
Yep. 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 So he's a deputy. I think a great depiction of what the Cuban style should be. Like you said, not a terrible amount of offense, but it's more or less about lateral movement, moving around, hit, not to get hit, things like that, and
Mm-hmm.
just pepper on the jab and doing quote unquote enough on offense in order to make it justified like that. I think
Yeah.
it's a great example of the Cuban style. One of the worst examples that you talk about was the Ringendahl Joel Casemiro fight. And correct me if I'm wrong, what's the guy saying that fought Canelo and that's from Cuban based out of Germany? William
Oh,
Still,
you
right?
talking about William Skull that fight?
Yeah,
Oh man.
so that's a horrible a way to display the Cuban style.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
mean, and some people felt like William Skull kind of like won that fight. I'm like, nah, man, nah. I didn't even think William Skull won his fight that he had, before that to win the IBF belt. So I mean, yeah. So but that kind of like show that is more of like what the Cuban style is, that they kind of like view it as, right? But with Andy Cruz, he's more of like the one that like oh, who's another guy that won to Robeisy Ramirez, right? When he was competing there at the featherweight division, he won gold medals there. Of course, won against Shakur Stevenson, right? So he has that type of style as well, but it's more about, like I said, being more economical, defense first, being efficient with the offense and that type of thing, right? It's not necessarily like say for example, David Morrell Jr. Like David Morrell Jr. is someone who would kind of like throw timely punches at times. Don't necessarily like have that defense stance first, where he would fight off of his back foot. But a majority of the fighters from Cuba kind of like had that style where it's more back foot based, spacing. Trying to figure out where their opponent is, keep the distance from their opponent, that type of thing. You know what I mean?
yeah, even David Morrell Jr. He's more talented offensively, right?
Yeah,
So you don't see him with all that running around stuff like that, dodging and back and forth. He's definitely more talented and more confident in his offensive arsenal. Definitely.
yeah. So that kind of like shows like what a majority of the Cuban fighters kind of like do. So, but like we were saying with this particular fight between Raymond Muratalla and Andy Cruz, like I don't go into fights like kind of like saying, hey, because he has this particular style in comparison to a more aggressive type of style, that I should be able to give more credence to the aggressive style, round by round like that. No, not necessarily. Not if it's not being effective. So if it's not being as effective, then you can't necessarily give them that type of credit, and that's why I feel like when one of the judges had it 10 rounds to 2 in favor of Raymond Muratalla, like that's crazy. But at this, like the same token, I said that when they had it, it was like when the first 8 rounds went through, I think it said two of the cards had it so much in favor of Raymond Muratalla that Andy Cruz would have had to win all 4 rounds in order for him to even get a draw, or at least through that Tim Cheatham, right? He would have had to win rounds 9 through 12 in order for it to be even. Same thing with the other scorecard that had it 116, 112. Like he had to win all 4 rounds in order for him to, make it even. So at the round 8, it was pretty much like over for Andy Cruz from a scorecard perspective, because when you have it like 78-74 in favor of one fighter through 8 rounds, yeah, that means that you pretty much could pack it in almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you look at that. So what's next for Raymond Muratalla, right? What's next for Andy Cruz? These He's definitely he's number one in the IBF. We see that. That's one of and once even on that, it wasn't a bad loss, right?
Right.
So I don't expect him to fade too much further down the rankings like that. His name still needs to be is still relevant, and this is what January. So of course I would like to see him back in the ring around spring, definitely in the fight. Just keep his name out there and definitely get a win. It doesn't have to be a walkover. I think he's going to be. He's definitely. Wow, I'm trying to project how good he's going to be. Right. Once again, now 7-1. Tons of amateur experience. Cuban style, not mess with the influence of the Ennis camp like that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of let's just try and project how good this guy's going to be. I think he's going to be a mainstay at 135. Definitely, I believe so. Especially with the transition of the division at this point now. I mean, your top names at 135 is what Muratalla, of course. I don't even want to say Shakur Stevenson right now because we know what he's about to do right there. Abdullah Mason, who William Zepeda, he's still there.
Right. Yeah, as far as
And
like
Schofield, I was Flo Schofield, people like that. So there's definitely time for Andy Cruz to make a name for himself within the division. Definitely, definitely.
right. But for me, it also like depends on what he does with matchroom boxing. You have a number of those contenders that you mentioned out there, but at the same token, like where are you going to fit someone like an Andy Cruz there in the picture within the lightweight division for him to get back into world title contention? Like if you got him against like a Sam Noakes or Maxie Hughes or something like that, is that going to work out for him there? Or if he ends up like fighting an interim champion there, like Yadier Herrera for the WBC or something like that, that could be there. But at the same time too, with it being like boxing being a business, are they going to be attracted to having Andy Cruz be, well, I wouldn't necessarily say featured in a fight, because this, being a main event, yeah, but that was because he was a mandatory challenger and Matchroom Boxing won the purse bid. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that would be the thing about it. Now, him having the loss, okay, what are they gonna do for him as far as like fitting him in for a fight card that they could have featuring somebody else? And is it gonna be something enough for him to get himself back into world title contention? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I
So,
tell you what, I'm going to corner you on this one, right? I want you to talk about the WBA champion, right? Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of what's going on, but how much longer will that belt be there by that guy?
well, they actually made the decision that it's not there for that guy. They put him as champion in recess, um, and they're gonna have the situation where they'll figure out who is going to fight for the WBA title. They do have Forrest Schofield rated at number one. They do have Lucas Body at number two. They did also mention that Lamont Roach could be in the picture there potentially. So it's either like Floyd Schofield fighting Lucas Body or fighting Lamont Roach Jr. Now, of course, we had the situation there with Lamont Rose Jr. after his bout against against the WBC interim champion and super lightweight in Isaac Pitbull Cruz, right?
Yep.
So now he's in a situation where either he could fight at 140 or he could see if he could have that opportunity to fight for a world title at 135. So now we got to see like how that sorts itself out.
Yeah, I definitely see that. WBA has him ranked at number 4, which is interesting because we know he's only fought one time at 135, to my knowledge. Uh, but definitely a worthy contender from 130, 135, even 140. 140, I think just size wise, I think I would like for him to say it 130, 135 like that. But and just going forward, even at 135, match wise, I think he would be favored to win against a Floyd Schofield just from the experience side alone, right? He just has that championship experience that Flo Schofield doesn't have. And unfortunately for what was that last year when Schofield was on that Saudi card, got sick over there, and they didn't get a chance to get that experience like that. So
Yeah.
I think that Roach would definitely be a favorite in that fight like that. I don't know much about this Lucas Body guy. Uh, like I said, the 135 class is really in a state of transition right now. It's trying to reconfigure itself. Who's on top? Who's the best? Things like that. So even right now, who's the class of 135? I really can't say there's one guy that's a class of 135. I love Abdullah Mason, but once again, experience wise, he just became a world champion over Nooks. We know that, but I don't want to push him too fast like that. He's just a lot of room to grow in that division. But once again, I don't think there's a clear cut pound for pound person in at 135 right now. I don't.
Well, the thing here with Lucas Body, that comes from him in what is it, 2024, where they had a situation where when you had the thing with Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, right? When they were originally scheduled to have that fight, it was supposed to be there on July 20th of that year. But with Mike Tyson having like complication or something like that, they had to delay that particular fight, right? And what was supposed to be part of that card was supposed to be Floyd Schofield versus Ashton Silva, right? But when the Paul versus Tyson got postponed, that particular fight got scrapped, and instead you had Ashton Silva going up against Lucas Body over in Tampa. And Lucas Body gave Ashton Silva H2O a two-piece and a biscuit and knocks him out. So with that being said, they kind of like went towards him being the guy that they were gonna back or something like that. I guess MVP or whatever it is, right? And then you didn't necessarily get a rematch between Lucas Body and Ashton Silva. You didn't get Floyd Schofield against Lucas Body in like that matchup, or like if it would have happened in November of 2024 for the actual Paul versus Tyson fight. But Lucas Body has been able to get himself in the mix and be a contender there in the lightweight division. He's 20-0 with 15 knockouts. So he's going to be, one of those guys that you do have to look out for in the lightweight division. But we'll see if he ends up having a fight against Floyd Schofield for the vacant WBA lightweight title or not. But we'll see how that goes on that front. You feel me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was your whole thing there on the lightweight circuit. Wanted to get into the co-feature bout that they had there at Fontainebleau in Las Vegas. It was in the light heavyweight division. Well, it was supposed to be in the light heavyweight division. Khalil Cole versus Jesse Hart. Um, y'all, for folks that kind of like are in the East Coast, they follow the East Coast boxing scene. They know about Khalil Cole and Jesse Hart. Being around that Philadelphia, New Jersey area and that type of thing, right? So you had these two that, at least for me, they were supposed to have a fight last year, and it didn't necessarily work out like that. So they put it into this card, and folks like following this because it was like, oh well, we'll see. If Jesse Hart could still contend there at 175. Khalil Cole, had that one loss where he got stopped in Philadelphia. Then he won by stoppage in the rematch. So we wanted to see what was going on. Now, the thing is, going into this fight, there was like a little story behind the scenes in reference to Khalil Cole. And some folks were like telling me, like, Khalil Cole ain't necessarily, on track for this particular fight against Jesse Hart. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, and they were like, hey, he might not be within weight. So I was like, oh, so he might be having some issues in this camp going up against Jesse Hart. Then you fast forward into the weigh-in, and they got Khalil Cole weighing in at 182, 5 pounds or 7 pounds or plus over the limit for 175. So when you see that, you're like, oh, now I want to see what's going on here. So you had the whole thing going on with the weigh-in, as far as like the actual weigh-in, not the ceremonial weigh-in. That's, some of y'all know what I'm talking about with that, right? So Jesse Hart's like, man, see, this is some BS or whatever. But I still want the fight. I've been waiting to fight this guy for months. He wants to come in almost 8 pounds overweight. All right, pay the fine, do whatever. I still want the fight. So they go ahead and they have this fight. And for those that watch the fight, oh my God, yo, that was like, oh my goodness, that was like slop in a bucket or something, man. I'm sorry, it was almost like slop in a bucket. But you kind of saw the whole thing with Khalil Cole, and what I was talking about with the stories, it pretty much like reflected there in that fight. You didn't really see Khalil Cole do jack for the majority of that for that fight. And for Jesse Hart, he was he was doing this thing there, particularly early or whatever it is. There were some times that he got caught, but there were other times where you seen that there was like a whole lot of holding, and then and you had the moment there early in the fight there. What was that? The third round, where Khalil Cole like had, I guess, ducked down a little bit, and then Hart was like above him, and then when he lifted up, he pretty much like slammed Jesse Hart like Hulk Hogan slammed Andre the Giant in WrestleMania or something. You know what I mean? It was crazy. Then you had another part there within the 6th round where Jesse Hart had a point taken away for excessive holding or whatever it was. There, Thomas Taylor. Listen, man, referee Thomas Taylor. Sometimes you see him there as far as like being a high-profile ref in some of the main events and things like that. But there's some times where he be having some questionable calls or something like that. But hey, maybe he had it on point here for the holding for Jesse Hart or whatever. But yeah, I mean, yeah, WWE, man. Like I'm telling you, man. Like I said, man, you had Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant or something, or Khalil Cole hit Jesse Hart with the Olympic slam. Shout out Kurt Angle or something. I mean, it was just nasty, right? It get through those whole 10 rounds, man. It was something to get through those 10 rounds. Scorecards was out there, and one judge had it 94-94, which is 5 rounds to 5, had the points taken away. Then it was, overruled by 2 judges, while David Sutherland had it 95-93, and Eric Cheek had it 96-92 in favor of Khalil Cole. Now remember, Khalil Cole was going in there as like the WBC USA light heavyweight top champion, but he was overweight, so he couldn't really, defend it. So he had to he basically vacated it with this decision. So you had one judge having it 6 rounds to 4, and another judge having it 7 rounds to 3 in favor of Khalil Cole. Now, if you watch that fight, come on, man. Come on. He said, hey, shout out Captain, man. The drinks was flowing, bro. The drinks was flowing, man. Hey, Now, I mean that was just nasty work. I'm talking about nasty work, man. It said Khalil Cole thought he was Booker T, the five-time WCW champion. Something because it was nasty work. You feel me? Um, but like I was saying, the overall output level there from Khalil Cole kind of like showing what he was that in the gym. That was pretty much like as some would say, it could have been like a fat camp because ain't no way he was anywhere near getting to 175 pounds for this fight, right? But and then at the same token, like I was saying, I thought this fight would have been happening in like October or November. I thought it was going to be part of that fight card with Boots Ennis and Uwisma Lima. I thought it was going to be on that card, but it wasn't. You know what I mean? So, but goodness, man, it was insane.
Yeah,
Uh,
I was able to catch some of this fight, right? And honestly, just not really impressed with either guy, right? Uh, but as you were reporting that Cole came in almost 8 pounds overweight.
yeah,
Just take a look inside that real quick. You're almost 8 pounds overweight, so you go back to your go back to being 30 days out. He's definitely overweight then, right? At that point, you say for example, he's 15 pounds overweight 30 days out. You know that you got to get down, right?
yep.
So that's cutting whatever you got to do, cutting out your carbs or whatever you got to do, cutting out your water to reduce your weight like that, doing more road work, whatever you got to do, you're supposed to be doing that, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
you come to the actual weigh-in and you're still almost 8 pounds overweight. That tells me that you really didn't even try, right? So now, what does it say about you, and what does it say about your camp? On top of that, knowing that you're that much overweight, right?
Mm-hmm.
For an important fight to you, for a fight that should have happened last year, like you stated, right? I mean that's really shameful on the fighter and his team for you come in that fight. And it looks like he paid a $30,000 fee. So if he paid a $30,000 penalty, what was his payday? What was the purse for him? Do we know
Yeah,
that?
I don't know, man. I don't know, but it it was something there, man. Shout out to Captain. He said that either Cole ain't happy with the business or he wasn't ready to fight. Hey, like it is Sanctus said, Cole fought at the pace of a tipsy sloth waiting on an Uber. Oh my god, yo, that's crazy. So, but I mean, some of y'all, well, I don't know that many people may know, but with Khalil Cole, over the past few fights, he's gone through a number of changes within the camp, as far as like the trainers and that type of thing or whatever. So like even before, I would have to go back to even before his first fight against what was it, Gallegos? Yeah, Manuel Gallegos, right? So from the fight that he had against Kwame Ritter back in July 2024 to like this second fight with Manuel Gallegos, he's gone through like a number of changes within the camp. But you were able to have the thing there where against Kwame Ritter, you did win that WBC USA light heavyweight title. Then the next fight against Manuel Gallegos, you had the performance that you had where he didn't look good at all, right? And he ends up getting stopped. Then the next fight, which was the rematch against Gallegos, he was looking real sharp. He was popping the jab. He was just like bow, bow, just peppering Gallegos with the jab. He basically won the fight, stopping Manuel Gallegos with the jab. And then here you are, like 8 months later, and you have this where you show up at like 182. Like, man, that's like kind of that's kind of crazy, right? Like Cole thought he was a human forklift. It's like, man, but and the thing about it is like for me, I'm kind of like well, I wouldn't necessarily say connected, but so I mean some of y'all know about one of the guys out there that's in the covering the sport of boxing here, and Jamila YSM Sports Media. He's based in Philadelphia, so he's been around the camps of Khalil Cole and the camps there of Jesse Hart, for some time. So I mean, he, kind of like knows, a number of the fight, not just the fighters, but he knows the trainers that are behind it. And, if y'all seen it there on the zone, you had, coach, one of the trainers there is Greg Hackett, Greg Hackett, there, based in Philadelphia, of course, fighter, trainer, and all of that too, right? And on the other side, you had, Coach Rell, who's, been a long time trainer there within the Philadelphia, New Jersey area himself. So, a lot of the stuff that's been going on in reference to this particular fight, that's almost like an internal back and forth and everything like that. But yeah, the thing with Khalil Cole though, that's, man, you know what I mean. Yeah, hey, it's another one. But remember, Fulton was in the camp there with Coach Bosey and them. He's been with Coach Bosey for a good little bit. So, and then he had the whole thing with his camp and being off and on as far as like when that fight with Shakur was supposed to happen. But at the same time, you still gotta be at some type of a weight to where, hey, I don't know when this fight's gonna happen, but if it's anywhere close or the fight is gonna happen, then I gotta be ready. I gotta be, either around camp or close to camp or something like that. Hey, I don't have to necessarily be a gym rat, but I gotta know, like, hey, if I know that they're working on this fight and trying to make this fight happen, I gotta be close to around fighting shape to where once they do announce the fight and everything is agreed to, I won't have to work so hard in order to get my weight down or do anything like that. And here in this case, it was almost like he didn't even, like he didn't even much care in that front.
And what's one of the words of our favorite Terrence Crawford? What do you always say?
What is it?
Stay ready, so you have to get ready.
Or it's like, nah. I thought it was like, hey, talk about your fight before you make it for your fight, something like that. But yeah, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Yeah, man, because it was just crazy. And for Jesse Hart, he felt like he did enough to get the win in that bout there against Khalil Cole, and the two judges didn't give him the decision, and that was just something there that was bad in itself. We, like I said, I mentioned Greg Hackett. He's talked about it as far as like immediately after the fight. Just recently he was on there with Najee of Cigar Talk, talking about the fight. But yeah, it was just something where you kind of like seen the effort there of Jesse Hart, because if you think about it, he's been out there as a contender within the 175-pound division for some time. Fighting like, what is it, like the Sullivan Barreras or something like that, or what is it, Joe Smith Jr. or Zordo Ramirez. Like he's fought those guys there within either 168 or 175. So he's kind of like been around that level to where he could compete for a world title or whatever, but just didn't necessarily get it. But here, he would have had that opportunity if you were able to get him that win or the decision win, and it just didn't work out for him on there. You know what I mean?
So, question for you. So, once again, Cole came in almost 8 pounds overweight, right?
Mhm.
And that, of course, that came out during the course of the weigh-ins, things like that. Do you think that Hart's camp should advise him not to take the fight? And the reason why I say that, going down to making weight. Let's look at some of our extreme cases here. Devin Haney was at 135. We saw this guy just be looking face all drawn in, but he always made the weight, right?
Yeah.
But part of making weight, you get down to that weight, and your body suffers, and you get physically
Sure.
weaker and even mentally weaker, right?
Uh-huh.
So Cody didn't do that. He didn't do that. He said basically, "F that. I'm not doing that. I'm coming in almost 8 pounds overweight." So that part, that's unfair to Hart, because your opponent didn't even try to make the weight and go through the process of making weight and getting weakened, things like that. So at some point, it kind of like, man, this dude is strong, right? He didn't go through what I went through. So was that wise for him to even take this fight?
Nah, I mean, my guy, shout out to Captain here. He says this was an affair of brotherly love. Jesse Hart was holding the young bull accountable. They knew he was BSing. Hey, the way that you said that, hey, hey, that means you from that area. If you saying young bull, that you from the area. But like with the question that you had there, Terrell, right? This is kind of like one of the tough parts about boxing and fighters is that given a certain situation or where you're at in your career, like for this thing here for like Jesse Hart, right? As I was mentioning before, you don't know if you could get like this type of opportunity to get back in the mix there within 175. So you're looking at what he's doing and you're like, number one, you're unprofessional, but number two, this is my opportunity to try to get back in the mix. So one, I need to have this fight in order to say, hey, I get the fight, I get the win, then I'm back ranked there within 175. That's number one. Number two is you're a professional fighter. You've been waiting all this time in order to have this fight happen. There probably could have been an instance where, like for example, they could have had the fight last October or whatever it was, right? And I guess like say for example, if they did and it ended up being scrapped, that means you had to go through a whole fight camp at that particular time, and it all goes down, as they say, down the drain, right? Now you have to do it all over again. You have to use resources. You have to go to the gym. You have to work with the trainers. You have to work with the strength and conditioning coaches or whatever it is. You have to work with guys that you want to spar and everything like that. Sometimes you have to call in folks in order to spar. You got to pay them to go in and get some work sometimes. So you're like, nah, I done used my resources, my time and my resources to get ready for this particular fight. And you show up here overweight and you think that, hey, nah, we can't necessarily get this fight. Nah, I want that and I want the fun and everything like that. In some cases, when they do have this instance, if you make weight, then you get paid, regardless if the fight happens or not. They do have some instances where that happens. But here in this case, I'm not 100% sure on that. So they're like, hey, no, we need to go ahead and go forward with this fight. You know what I mean? So that's the thing about it. You know what I mean? Shout out Kevin. He says, man, GHB, yeah, Greg Hackett, Jesse Hart, even Coach Rail, they trying to wake dude up. Yeah, but I mean, hey, for Khalil Cole, hey, you know, I can't necessarily say it is what it is because there's like a lot of people that I'm familiar with, you're familiar with, so nah, that's just a real tough situation there, at least for right now for Khalil Cole. He does get this win, but what does this mean for him afterwards? I don't know. I really don't. It's a real sketchy situation there for Khalil Cole because you would think like he's right in the brink of contending there within 175 or trying to get to that next step before he could fight for a world title there at 175, but he's just not necessarily staying focused on that front. You know what I mean? So that's what you got on there, man. Um, Other fights that were, of course, on that card there at the Fountain Blue in Las Vegas did include former world champion there, Israel Majumov, getting a decision win over Luis Salazar. He was there a little bit over 154 for this. He's been, dealing with a lot, over the past, well, it's almost going to be like a year because remember, he fought on that February 22nd card against Virgil Ortiz, and the whole like rumor of the buzz was that when they said a lot of people were sick over there in Riyadh during that fight week, that Majumov was one of the ones that kind of like was hit the most from it. So he had to recover with a lot from that particular point up to now. So this is his first fight since the bout against Virgil Ortiz Jr. Got the win there on that front. You did have Amari Jones and Zakeem Moses get decision wins on that fight card. Capo Gallegos is a rising prospect there in the lightweight division. Got a stoppage win on that fight card as well. So that kind of like rounds things out. All right. So now we moving forward to what's going to be happening on January 31st. A lot of activity there on that front. Of course, we got two world title bouts that'll be there for the 154-pound division. You do have the thing there with the WBA and the WBO titles on the line. There's Xander Zayas versus Abbas Barao that's going to be in Puerto Rico. As I mentioned here at the pretty much at the beginning of the show, it's going to be on Top Rank Classics. There, whether you got like Fubo TV or one of those things there as far as like what's on Roku or whatever it is, you'll be able to see those fights on the Top Rank Classics channel or whatever it is. So I'm very thankful that that fight is going to be shown somewhere, right? And of course, you got Baker Muratalla versus Josh Kelly for the IBF title, that 154 pounds. That's going to be on earlier in the day, right? But then you got what's going down on Ring 6 in Madison Square Garden. Of course, headlining bout there for the Ring Magazine title there, the WBO title there at 140 pounds. Teofimo Lopez versus Shakur Stevenson. Teofimo Lopez defending that title for, I think, it will be the fourth time there at the 140-pound division. Shakur Stevenson, of course, WBC champion at 135 pounds, moving up to 140 to face Teofimo Lopez, right? Shout out to Champ Ross in the building. He said, yeah, best weekend in a long time there in boxing. Yeah. Hey, and of course, we got, over here in the area, Pro Box TV on that Friday night. So whole bunch of boxing action. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, with this headlining bout here, Teofimo Lopez, Shakur Stevenson, it's going to be interesting to say the least. He says, if I'm Teofimo Lopez, I'm getting Tim Cheeto in there as a judge by any means. Come on, man. Oh, man, it's crazy. But you got Teofimo Lopez there, of course, being the defending champion. We going in there, of course, having those losses to George Kambosos, right? But didn't necessarily have a loss since then. Last bout against Arnold Barbosa Jr., who was the WBO mandatory at the time, was able to get a unanimous decision win, outpoint him, for 12 rounds. Like, all right. Shakur Stevenson, of course, being the WBC lightweight champion, he was able to, have his performance against William Cepeda over in Queens, New York, last summer, which, a lot of people were kind of like impressed with his performance, particularly in the first half of the fight. And then he kind of like, toned it down a little bit there in the back half of the fight. A lot of people going into this feel like it is a bad style matchup, that they're fearing for the worst, that it could be similar to Teofimo Lopez versus Sandor Martin. Hoping not. He said, Captain said, hey, Teofimo might win if Tim Cheatham is involved. Oh, come on. But, I think it's more about what Teofimo could do, because everyone knows that Shakur Stevenson has one style. I know he's been talking in these press conferences and these interviews that, you don't know what he's going to do there when he shows up. But like, as I was saying there when we were talking about the fight between Raymond Muratalla and Andy Cruz, if you're not basically getting done up or touched up within your own element, why change it up? So for Shakur Stevenson, it's going to be distance, stepping in, stepping out, popping jabs, counter right hands or whatever, or what he could do, what he's going to be in there as a southpaw. So it'd be like counter left hands, and if he's like, if you don't do anything that gets him out of his comfort zone, then he ain't gonna get out of his comfort zone. And that's pretty much gonna be like it is. Both of these fighters are around the same height, around the same reach. They saying like, hey, that Shakur could be, there in the ring and kind of maybe be more, what I would say, more stocky going into the fight there against Teofimo Lopez, but we'll see. I don't think that's going to be much of a difference there. You know what I mean? Um, but like I said, with Teofimo Lopez, you've seen his fights against, as I said, Sandor Martin. You've seen his fight against Jermaine Ortiz, which I'm gonna kind of talk about here a little bit later, right? And going up against a Steve Claggett that aren't isn't necessarily guys that are offense first or whatever it is, right? So if Teofimo Lopez is forced to take the lead, it makes it be a little bit troubling, so to speak, because he doesn't necessarily put punches together like that. He's more of a guy that like tries to beat you with either counter punching or like just quick 1-2 combo or something like that. You know what I mean? His champ Raw says there with the judges, Tim Cheatham and Morris Jarman need to be investigated every time it sees their name. Just get ready for a split decision or a majority decision. He says usually their scorecards are scored half the time at the free food buffet. Come on, man. Come on, man. Oh man, that's wild. But yeah, with Tio, I like to see if he has like a different element to his game here for this upcoming fight against Shakur Stevenson. A lot of people know about Shakur Stevenson in his corner. Wally Moses, of course, his grandfather and trainer. On the other side, you got Teofimo Lopez Sr. as the trainer, and yeah, he was talking a lot at the press conference and things like that. But we don't necessarily see, or in the time when Teofimo Lopez lost to George Kambosos, you really didn't see much as far as like any tactical adjustments from Teofimo Lopez Sr. Now, if we have something where Shakur Stevenson has a pretty good advantage in those first few rounds or whatever it is, what is Teofimo Lopez Sr. going to tell him? Is it going to be similar to what he said in the George Kambosos fight, or something different? Who knows? But I think it's going to be well. Let me be real with y'all. I'm hoping that is going to be an interesting bout. Okay, you know what I'm hoping? I'm hoping it's like this, right? Like, say for example, from last year, you had a bout on March 1st of last year between Sandor Martin, right, and Alberto Puello. You talk about two guys that aren't necessarily offense first or very active with their hands. So going into that fight, I'm like, oh man, this might not look good. This might look good. But when the fight happened, hey, there was a little bit of good action between those two, right? Or like, say for example, what we just seen here yesterday, Raymond Muratalla versus Andy Cruz. Some folks are like Andy Cruz, being like a back foot fighter, defense first, or defense based fighter that it could make for a very difficult fight. You had a number of moments where it was great action between both fighters. So hopefully we see the same thing here with Teofimo Lopez and Shakur Stevenson. That's what I'm looking for. Hopefully that is the case here in this, and want to see if that goes or that happens. You know what I'm saying? Terrell, you got any takes on this upcoming bout?
Yeah, first of all, just definitely looking forward to seeing Xander Zayas coming up, defending this belt. See his progression as far as how good he's going to be and continues to be. So look forward to that. But even moving forward to the Tio Stevenson fight, we all, like I said, we all know what Stevenson's going to do. We know he's probably I would say he's definitely the best defensive fighter out there in the game, regardless of weight class. Definitely, hands down, right? We know that.
Mm-hmm.
So we know his path to victory. And I think for me, I want to look back at when Stevenson fought, I think it was Jamel Herring at 126, 130, whatever it was, right?
It was at 130.
Yeah. So, and that's where his coming out party. Like, wow, this guy is the defensive genius, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in that fight, I think Herring can do nothing with him. Even no adjustments or nothing like that.
Yeah.
But for a defensive specialist, you want your man to come at you, and once again, one of the most beautiful things I love about Shakur, that dude stands right there in the pocket
Mm-hmm.
and fight, dodge, little shoulder roll here and there, and is able to see punches coming back and forth like that,
Yeah.
right? So when we look at an athlete like Tio, as I say, a fast muscle twist person type person, highly athletic like that. So highly reactive things like that. So when I look at that, what's his path to victory? Now, once again, we know what Shakur does. He wants you to come to him. That's to his advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Tio, in my regard, would have to stay on the outside and box. This and I think that's his path to victory for this fight. Just punt, hit, like we're saying, boxing, hit and not get hit like that. So just need to stay. And one thing too, like I said, this is at 140.
Yep.
This is Shakur's first fight at 140. We never seen him like that. I don't think it's that much of a disadvantage. Hell, we've seen even Roach come up to 140 from 130 and compete and beat me competitive and should have won that fight. So
Yeah.
I don't think the weight is going to be a problem for Shakur. I don't think at all. I think, of course, Tio will be stronger. He's been at 140 for a while, so we know that.
Mm-hmm.
But even just backtrack a little bit, when we go, let's go back down to 135 when we had our four kings in that class, whether it be Tank, Garcia, Haney, even Shakur, like that. It's kind of funny now. So much has happened since we had those quote unquote four kings, and now these two are finally fighting years later, which seems like so long ago from 135. But like you said, for Tio, you've already highlighted the things that he does do well and what he doesn't do well, right? Uh, he
Mm-hmm.
does like I say he doesn't do well as that aggressive front foot fighter. But so for me, I think he needs to stay lateral and just pot shot here and there, pepper do a little jab out there. To me, that's his path of victory. And of course, I don't know, I don't know. It's gonna be it's gonna be a chess match for the first few rounds, right? Because keep in mind, even though Teal has not always shined, this guy he knows what's at stake. He knows what's at stake. He doesn't want to lose his belt, and he loses
Yeah.
his belt. Where's he go from that point? I mean, he's not done, but he knows what's at stake, and I think he'll perform within a moment. But again, no one has beaten Shakur Stevenson yet. No one,
Right.
no one even close, right?
Right.
So, but it's Teal the guy to do it. I can me personally, I say this is a 50-50 fight for me. It really is, and the reason why I say that, even though Shakur's unbeaten and that supreme defensive style, he's moving up in weight. Uh, Teal's gonna be stronger, and Teal has experience too. So for me, it's a 50-50 fight. That's for me.
Yeah. I mean, they what is it? I'm checking the odds and stuff like that, and they still have it in favor of Shakur Stevenson. I was talking about it, some time back, and they had him as around like a 3-1 favorite, and Teofimo as a 2-1 underdog. And that's something there. You got Teofimo Lopez that has been like I said been a champion there at 135. As the Ring Magazine champion or lineal champion there at 140 pounds. And yet, with Shakur Stevenson having his first bout at 140 pounds, he's still like a 3-1 favorite against Teofimo Lopez. So it's almost like they're not giving much credence towards Teofimo Lopez as far as like what he's done so far at 140 since I would say since beating Josh Taylor. You know, so for me it's more about Shakur Stevenson and his. I guess they feel like his style is just all wrong for Teofimo Lopez to where Teofimo Lopez doesn't have the the offensive firepower to really kind of like give Shakur Stevenson that many fits. I don't know if they look at it as almost similar to when Shakur Stevenson fought Oscar Valdez when he unified the WBC and WBO titles at 130. But it almost seems like that's kind of like what these folks that are putting in their money, they're just saying like, hey, we just feel like Stevenson has a style that that they don't feel like Teofimo Lopez could catch up to. And I kind of like agree with it to a certain extent because the Teofimo Lopez that I guess people kind of gravitated towards, or where they said, hey, oh, okay, he's doing this. All of that stuff was like at 135. Like when he's been at 140, you haven't necessarily seen those knockouts. You haven't seen those stoppages. You haven't seen, as a lot of people say, like, that athleticism that makes him be like steps above, or steps further than a lot of the other fighters that he's faced. You know what I mean? It only gets him up to a certain point, but outside of that, like, does it get him to where he goes to the next level and says that he's much better than these guys? You don't, like, you haven't really seen it in his recent fights. Like even in his recent fight against Arnold Barbosa Jr., like, yeah, he was able to outpoint him and kind of like be better than Barbosa from a speed perspective or something like that. But other than that, nothing to like kind of say, hey, yeah, we see that Barbosa is overmatched in this sense. Now, like, take it to the next level and say, hey, let's see if you'll be able to stop him more. Make something to where you could say that he could stop Arnold Barbosa Jr. Like you didn't see that in this last bout of their last make, right? So here against Shakur Stevenson, a lot of people aren't seeing him, doing what he's been doing at 140, is outpointing a lot of his opponents to a decision win. They just feel like it's Shakur Stevenson that'll be the one that'll defeat him on that sense. So we'll see how that happen or how that goes there on that front. Shout out to G5 Jeff in the building there saying Tim Cheeto needs to be drug tested.
And even just last year on the Shakur fight coming up, right? Who's Tio's trainer?
Tio Senior.
Yep. So I tell you what. So how many times will you go to school and they say, I'm going to give you the answer to the test. All you got to do is prepare and then take the test, right? So once again, we know what Stevens is going to do. And so that means they already have all the answers to the test. There's no mystery about what he does, right? We know that. So for me, if Tio comes to the fight and gets badly outpointed, I'm going to be looking straight at his corner. And we know for a long time, it's been out there that Tio should get a better trainer. So if, like I said, if Tio comes out there and just takes the place with his performance and there's no aim-ring adjustments like that, yeah, it's going to be a lot of problems for his father to not be his trainer no more. Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I like to see what Tio Senior does. As I was mentioning, if Shakur has like a big lead, or it's something where what from an offensive perspective that Teofimo Lopez isn't successful early in the bout, let's see what Tio Senior does in order to adjust, because this, even though I don't feel like it kind of like is this way, but this almost seems like where we had Devin Haney versus Brian Norman Jr. And you kind of like seeing the skill levels be shown early in that bout. And then you have Brian Norman Jr. having to catch up after, getting knocked down, and having to, try to see what he could do in order to catch up. But the corner at the time wasn't necessarily able to, do what needed to be done in order for him to get back in the fight. Now, what could happen here for Teofimo Lopez if he ends up being down significantly in this bout against Shakur Stevenson? How will Teofimo Lopez Sr. adjust to it, especially with all of the stuff that Teofimo Lopez Sr. was talking about in that press conference? You know what I mean? So we do have that to look forward to. All right, now in the co-feature bout, we have Keyshawn Davis versus Jermaine Ortiz. This is going to be a WBO eliminator bout within that 140-pound division. Mentioned Jermaine Ortiz, of course, did face Teofimo Lopez earlier in his career. He did also face Vasily Lomachenko in his career too, right? And this is going to be Keyshawn Davis's first fight at 140 pounds. Of course, he had been the WBO champion at lightweight, was slated to defend the WBO title against Edwin De Los Santos last summer in Norfolk, but ended up being, 4 pounds overweight and stuff like that. So that fight didn't happen. So this will be Keyshawn's first fight since February 14th of last year against Dennis Berinchik for that WBO lightweight title. We kind of like will see, what he's going to be able to do in this sense. He did say like a lot of things have been going on. We know about that whole story about him, breaking away from B&B or Brian Bomac McIntyre and a number of people within that team, and kind of like keeping his local, pretty much his local folks there with him and things like that. And then on the flip side, you do have there with Jermaine Ortiz, getting back in the mix there within the 140-pound division. Did have, a win there against Yomar Alamo last March in Orlando. Had another fight within in that same venue months later. So he's like, hey, this win gets him back in the mix there at 140 pounds. And, wanted to see if I could get this real quick here as, I was able to speak with Jermaine Ortiz there, a couple of days ago, and this was like a couple of things that he was mentioning, while I did have the conversation with him. So we're gonna go through a couple of the questions that I have for him, and they'll, provide the answers here on this front. So let's see, we'll run it right here. Now, what is it that you see in Keyshawn that you could take advantage of on January 31st?
I have to see. I'm gonna have to see on 31st what I could take advantage of. But I just think, again, I'm a faster fighter. I think I got better movement. I just don't think he's gonna be able to hit me.
Yeah, you've been able to show, a lot of things in the ring as far as like your movement and technical skill, as they say, being a technician and everything
Yeah.
like that. So, you just don't feel like Keyshawn will be able to, keep up with that movement and, you'll be able to outpoint him. And then, eventually, hey, you get the win, get the stoppage decisions, whatever. But, you don't really think that he has the skill that you have there in the ring.
No, he got skills. He's definitely a skillful fighter. To get to this level of boxing, you have to have skill. You have to be a good fighter. I just think styles make fights, and I just think when it comes to us two facing off in the ring, there's going to be a disparity.
Gotcha. Now, the last time that I saw you live was against Yomar Alamo in Orlando in March. There, you had the win there, decision win. No, you had a fight after that, pretty much in the same venue later in the year last year. But after that win against Yomar Alamo, you did say that you wanted a shot at a world title, and at that particular time, you did kind of mention Gary Antoine Russell was the WBA champion. Now, what do you feel what the win over Keyshawn Davis can do for you in the super lightweight division?
I think it will definitely set me up for a world title. This is going to be for the WBO title eliminator. So, winner should be getting the winner of Teofimo and Shakur.
Word, gotcha. Now I'm gonna, get to that here in a little bit. But one things that I've seen in previous conversations that I've heard from Keyshawn Davis is that he kind of like is really confident in this battle. That he said that he's gonna stop you, and that quote when they were mentioning like what you were talking about, he said, "quote Your words don't match what you do in the ring." Does it seem like Keyshawn is overlooking you in this match on January 31st?
He could be overlooking me, and I think there's going to be a big mistake on his end. But I'm all for him making all the mistakes in the world,
Gotcha. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, just wanted to kind of like have that. I mean, that's part of the full interview, like I said, it's on the YouTube page, so y'all be able to check it out on the YouTube page there with my conversation with Jermaine Ortiz. But he knows what's at stake here for this. I mean, this gets him there one step closer. He probably would be able to take the contender spot there for the WBO light welterweight. Well, actually, that's what they do call it for the WBO. It's actually the light welterweight title. But of course, with the main event there with Teofimo Lopez versus Shakur Stevenson, that would be like, hey, whoever wins this will be able to face those folks next there. But those are the comments here from Jermaine Ortiz there. But you got the chef here, brother Terrell. What do you think about that particular matchup there with Keyshawn Davis and Jermaine Ortiz?
I mean, it's a highly interesting bout. We know with Keyshawn, his past 6 to 8 months has been well documented. So, in addition to the fight himself, I hope and pray he comports himself well, going to the fight at the venues, things like that, and corrected those mistakes from himself and his camp from that point. So, I'm sure that will take care of itself. But once again, going up to 140, he definitely has a size for the weight class.
Yeah.
So that's not really a concern for me. Uh, I mean, he just needs to go up there and perform. That's all to it, you know. Because once again, while 140 is more together than 135, there's opportunities there at 140. It really is. There's opportunities for him to jump in there and make a name for himself and etch out some rankings within 140. Hell, once again, this is January, right? At this point now, you
Yep.
get a early fight in January. If you can come in here and be successful, and keep in mind, this is a co-main card. How many times are you move up to a weight class and you're on a co-main? That doesn't happen too often at all. But
Hmm.
that just speaks of his name, his drawing power, and of course his experience and what we expect of him like that. So I'm waiting to see what he's gonna do. And I think he's got a good opponent with a good name. We know Ortiz has been there with all those people that you mentioned before. Has come up short, like in that regard for against the top competition, but never he's a name that's near the top of the class since 135 and 140. So just I want Keyshawn going there and perform like he's been doing. He's been sharp. Um, Even in the video you played with your interview with Ortiz, he didn't give a whole lot. But the main thing he said that he thought that he thinks that Keyshawn is not fast enough and that he won't be able to be hit. I'm not sure about that because Keyshawn does have good speed. He does. So
Hmm.
it'll be good. It'll be good. It's a good fight.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good fight. You got there with Jermaine Ortiz, of course, having the experience there at 140 pounds. Um, I think his movement is going to be something that kind of like will make things be a different look there for Keyshawn Davis. I mean, I know that he had his last bout against Dennis Berinchyk, who was kind of like as they say, a technical fighter. As you're sitting there with him, being at the time the WBO champion before losing to Keyshawn Davis. But at the time, Keyshawn used his speed to overwhelm Dennis Berinchyk. But at the same token, I also felt like he was, just like the size difference was evident
Oh
there
yeah.
in that particular fight. Now we
Uh,
got to see if that's going to reflect here in this bout against Jermaine Ortiz because, as I said, I mean, you're going into this 140-pound division, and maybe that's the division that you probably should have, been in, I guess, after your win against Dennis Berinchyk. But, you did want to have that world title defense, or you pushed to have that world title defense over in your hometown, but it just, didn't necessarily happen. Now how are you going to perform here after being out of the ring for as long as you've been? Not only that, you've gone through a lot, as you've said in multiple interviews over the past few months. Like you've had losses to friends, losses to family, had things going on, outside the ring, dealing with depression, that type of stuff, and now you're back in the ring or back in the camp and stuff like that. So we got to see how you kind of like perform in that sense, right? um so my thing would be, how are you going to react to someone like a Jermaine Ortiz who has the experience of that he has, that's been in the ring with Teofimo Lopez there at 140 pounds and stuff like that. So, um, we'll see how that goes on that front there. But, that kind of like is, as I said, a WBO eliminator bout. You do have the WBC middleweight title on the line. Carlos Adames getting in the ring there against Austin Ammo Williams there, with Adames having his first bout since going up against, what was it, Hamza Shiraz or whatever it is, right? So, with that, now he has this thing here against Ammo Williams. We thought Adames would have been able to get a unification bout there at, 160. Didn't happen. So, other than that, he's kind of like been, on the shelf since that Hamza Shiraz fight. Emma Williams been able to, respond to his loss to Hamza Shiraz in that Queensbury versus Matchroom 5v5, and has, scored a few wins, there. So now here he is having this opportunity to fight for and win the world title against someone like a Carlos Adames that has, I guess, a balance of, defense and offense and things like that. So we'll see how that fight shapes up. You're also going to have their Bruce Carrington going up against Carlos Castro for the WBC featherweight championship on there. You're also going to have Jarrell Big Baby Miller on this card there, that's going to be fighting here against Kingsley Abe there in the heavyweight division. So it makes for, a fairly busy card there with hopefully the main event is going to be that way too. But that kind of like makes it a packed show there for January 31st at Madison Square Garden. And like I said, you got what's going on over in Puerto Rico with that unification bout at 154. You got what's going on over in the UK with the IBF 154-pound title on the line. So it's a lot of action there within that particular day in itself, man. So I'm looking forward to it. And of course, had the whole thing with the Pro Box TV on Friday night too. So that's a lot. So that mainly like rounds out what I had here. This been like almost a show there for like 2 hours. Was able to speak on what went down, of course, yesterday, and what's upcoming for Ring 6. For the midweek report, I'm gonna see what's going on here in this area to see if they're gonna have something relative to the Pro Box event. I'm not sure because we got to still figure out what's going on with the whole thing with the storm and everything like that, right? But let's see. But hold on. What was this? The Lemos joint? What is that? The Gustavo Lemos joint? They're talking about Lemos fight canceled. So we'll see, man. I have to see which one you're kind of like referring to there on that front. So is that the one that they were? I think he was supposed to be. Gustavo Lemos was supposed to be on. I don't know, but yeah. But we got all the action that's coming up. Like I said, Pro Box January 30th. They're at Maryland Live in Hanover, and then all of the fights that's going to be on for January 31st. We all to look forward to. All right. So with that, big thanks for everyone that's been able to tune in live. And we'll have this here in audio form pretty soon. That'll be available on Spotify. Thanks for Brother Terrell here for joining us here on this live conversation. Like I said, hit the like button, hit the share button there for this particular stream. And I will be catching y'all later. Until next time, y'all. Peace out.
Out.